effective. Okay, perfect. So Allie, I'll get started if you're all set. Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Jamie and I didn't get a chance to introduce ourselves, so we'll use this slide to do so. Thanks for joining us. My name is Rita Josephson. I'm an Assistant Vice President with CCS, and I am thrilled to join you all today alongside my wonderful colleague, Jamie Papagiorgio, who's also an Assistant VP with CCS. And we'll be presenting some data from the 2022 Giving USA report, and following the presentation we'll probably have some time for questions, but we'll also share our contact information if you'd like to connect after about anything we talked about or something different. So Jamie and I have worked with several clients in New Jersey. This is just a kind of a select few New Jersey clients that CCS has worked with over the years. We've worked with hundreds of clients based in the area. Right now, working with Seeds, Access Changes Everything, based in Newark. We've worked with the Jersey City Free Public Library, the Episcopal Diocese, but you'll also see some of our environmental-based clients here as well. So CCS has served more than 270 charitable organizations in the state of New Jersey, including hospitals, schools, parishes, universities, really every organization you could imagine. And many of our senior CCSers reside in the state. And for those of you who don't know CCS, many of you likely do. We're a global nonprofit consulting firm. We partner with nonprofit organizations like yours across sectors to help advance missions, elevate impact, and affect meaningful change for the communities that they serve. And our firm has been around for over 75 years, and last year was one of great impact. I'll go through this pretty quickly, but last year we had the privilege of partnering with more than 700 organizations around the world, 185 of which are in the tri-state area. And we have managed over the last year more than 300 campaigns, raising billions of dollars for their causes. And we have over 500 CCSers, we call them, professionals who've worked across 18 countries, 350 cities, 44 states in the US. And we're really thrilled that we recently launched our first pro bono pilot program, having partnered with 4 community-based nonprofit organizations. And we really remain committed to that work. We are incredibly proud of our continued growth. If you can go back just one slide, sorry, Allie. Not just as a team, but in our partnerships, but also with the variety of services that we provide our partners. And this includes anything from campaign management and feasibility and planning studies to data analytics. We have a really robust data analytics team, a research team, systems work, strategic planning, and more. And my colleague will get started on chatting with you a bit about the report. Jamie?
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Rita said, we are here today to present the Giving USA data from June 2022, and we'll also discuss some of the trends. So Giving USA releases its report every June. So in June of this year, of 2024, we'll have a new report. So this data feels a little stale, but this is the most recent data that we have access to. So I want to address a little bit about what this report is and how it comes together. So the Giving USA report is the oldest, longest running, most comprehensive report on philanthropy in the US. And the annual report on philanthropy, what we reference quite a bit in this presentation today, is more than 350 pages long, with chapters that provide in-depth analysis of findings on total charitable giving, which we'll cover, giving by sources we'll also cover, and giving to major recipient categories. So it's presented by Giving USA, which is a public service initiative of the Giving Institute, of which CCS is a proud member. And the research and data we're going to walk through is prepared by research teams at Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. And we're very grateful for their hard work to provide us with this information and for us to be able to provide it to you today. So there's a lot of exciting data, interesting trends to look at and explore as we consider how to best operate and position the teams for success. So what is included in this report, right? And what is not? So it includes combined giving estimates from 2022. And to be clear, data will be broken up by source, right? Individuals, foundations, etc., and by recipients. So there's 9 subsectors. You'll get to see them on a bunch of charts, such as environment and animals, which we'll try and delve into a little bit deeper today, education, religion, and others. We'll also look back at historical data to understand the context and make some analysis around why the numbers are the way they are. But it does not include global or regional giving. It also does not include giving amounts by specific donors or to specific organizations. And then as we go through towards the end of the presentation today, we'll actually provide additional data, which is survey data that CCS collected at the end of 2022. So we'll be sharing that a little bit later, and I will highlight this as that data to be clear. So let's talk about giving, right? Now, these are the actual numbers, right? So the total amount of giving declined from 516 billion in 2021 to 499 billion in 2022, just a 3.4% decline compared to 2021. So economic indicators significantly influence the drop in giving. I'll go into a little bit more detail in a moment, but adjusted for inflation, total giving declined 10.5% year over year. So a couple things to point out. 499 billion is a massive number, right? It's a huge number, right? It's almost $500 billion. And despite the decline in giving, there's a lot to be celebrated with the tremendous level of giving that we see in our country. So total charitable giving has only fallen 3 other times in the last 40 years in current dollars, and that was in 87, 2008, and then 2009. And why do we think this happened, right? Well, 2020 and 2021 were incredible years for philanthropy. You all would probably agree, right? They disrupted the way we do business. They led to historical peak in philanthropy. It was a different years, right? So in 2022, there was economic factors that really impacted it. With the decline in the S&P 500, a decrease in disposable income, 40-year high inflation rate, right? It was expected that there would be an impact on philanthropic giving. And looking at this chart, a common question we receive is actually, how does this giving number compare with pre-pandemic levels of giving? So, is this just a return? What does this really look like? Thinking through to pre-2020. So yes, this value is about the same as 2019, right? We don't say that is it a return to normal, but it is not a huge decline when looking historically and looking at the historical picture of things. So as we said, right, giving reached the $500 billion threshold in current dollars in 2021, which you can clearly see on the chart. Right, when adjusted for inflation, 2020 and 2021 were 2 of the best years of giving on record. And as I said, a big impact was economic conditions. Right, these economic conditions introduced new challenges that really impacted all the numbers that you see for 2022. So to delve a little bit deeper in the next slide about these economic challenges, I've mentioned them, in a bigger way, and you can see the bullets, but households were impacted by this economic uncertainty, right? The threat of the recession, inflation, changes in the stock market, and in turn, individual giving took the biggest hit of all in 2022. So in 2020 and 2021, giving was buoyed by a strong stock market. In 2022, it appears that individual donors were impacted by the changing economic conditions. And so despite these challenges, there were bright spots, right, in the economy. There was a growth in GDP. There was low unemployment. But, this is what happened. The economic picture that emerges suggests that many households were stable, but we didn't see job losses. We didn't see an increase in unemployment the way we did in the Great Recession. But households tend to give when they are financially and economically secure. And inflationary pressures really impacted that. It meant that fewer households had extra to give. And in addition, donors may not have been as compelled to respond to immediate needs as they had been during the early days of COVID-19 or the Great Recession. So now I'm going to pass it back to Rita to go into a little bit more detail about the individual giving and other things.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. And I saw a couple of you join us a little late. We're glad you're here. Welcome. Since we're a relatively small group, if you have any questions, feel free, as they kind of come up as we go through this data, feel free to just drop them in the chat or raise your hand. I might not be able to see you, but my colleague Allie will see and will stop me. So let's start to unpack the data and the key themes a bit. As you see from this chart, which is one of my favorite screenshots from the data that we received, individuals really continue to play a significant role in philanthropy, and we're not seeing that stopping anytime soon. They're really contributing the lion's share of total charitable giving. But the way the pie is, oh, sorry. But the way the pie is sliced is changing, and we'll walk through what those changes are looking like on subsequent slides. So overall, from this 2022 data, individual giving made up 64% of total charitable giving, foundations at 21%, bequests at 9%, and corporations at 6%. And you'll note that across all sources of giving, the year-over-year decline that Jamie mentioned, this is based on inflation-adjusted dollars. If we were to look at this graph in current dollars, we'd see giving by foundations and corporations increased by 2.5% and almost 3.5% respectively. And we'll dive into why that might be shortly. And two final notes before we go to the next slide. As we digest this, family foundations make up about half of foundation giving, which is important for understanding who is really driving philanthropy. Like it really is those individuals at foundations, likely the contacts that you're getting in touch with as you're applying for grants. And looking at bequests, with the great wealth transfer, many experts in the field anticipate this 9% to really go up as more data comes to light. And on our next slide, we'll take a closer look at giving by individuals. So after two of the most generous giving years on record that we saw, we did see a decline in individuals. And this graph shows inflation-adjusted dollars in the yellow bars, and current dollars in the teal line. And as you can see, last year we saw a decline of 13.4% when adjusted for inflation, about 6.4% in current dollars. And we can certainly see and put this into the context of the economy. High inflation, lack of personal disposable income, and a decline in the S&P 500, along with other unique events. The donors down and dollars up trend we've been discussing in recent years is being tested here, but in 2022 we instead saw donors down and dollars down. And the question worth asking ourselves is, will we continue to see this as a trend, or is this an anomaly? And hopefully the latter. That being said, the number of mega gifts continue to hold strong at 5% of all individual giving for the second year in a row, meaning 5% of all individual giving is from those who gave $500 million plus in the year. So the concentration of the pyramid of individual giving continues to get quite steep. And I found this graph to be particularly interesting. We show here the total individual giving as a percentage of disposable personal income. So we typically look at this data knowing disposable personal income is tied to total household income, which is a key determinant of how much households give. And as you can see from this graph, it has fluctuated over the last 40 years, averaging somewhere around 2%. Over the last 5 years, since 2017, we saw it go from 2% to 1.7%. From 2019 to 2021, individual giving represented 1.8% of disposable personal income. And the last time we saw it reach such low levels was in 1995. And what this tells us is what we need to really look at: how we're inspiring donors to give more of their disposable income to causes they care about. I know that's something, I'm thinking about with my current client, and we need to work harder for those millennial dollars. From a millennial herself, mid-level donors who are rising up the ranks and, paying out of pocket at this point in their lives. This is particularly true as we look towards the end of last year and the beginning of this year, and student loan payments starting up again. So, we'll have to kind of work just as hard to capture higher percentages of their disposable income, knowing there are further financial commitments and responsibilities on the horizon for them. So we'll talk DAFs now for a bit. So over the last couple of years of presenting this data, this is really the number one question that we've been asked at CCS, which I think speaks to the growing importance of DAFs in our field, donor advised funds. So they've reached $72.67 billion in 2021, up a whopping 46.6% from 2020's $50 billion record high, which is really incredible. And so grants from community foundation-based DAFs appear in foundation giving in Giving USA data, and transfers from the independent DAF sponsors, including National Christian Foundation, which is not a foundation legally despite the name, and many others are not captured as new money for philanthropy, which we think is interesting. They are distributions of prior gifts made by donors to the charity that sponsors the DAF. And this year, we took the net of contributions from DAFs based at community foundations and grants in DAFs in order to increase or decrease double counting of that. And on this slide, we'll take a closer look at foundation giving. They're really playing a more significant role in the philanthropic landscape. We'd love to hear from you all on how that's affecting your work in your respective departments. On the left-hand side here is a chart of the distribution from 1982. On the right side, 40 years later, you see what the distribution looks like in 2022. So giving by foundations has grown at an incredible rate, eating into the share of the pie given by individuals. And at this point, every $1 of about $1 of every $5 given to charity comes from foundations. So when you dig into this, 21% from foundations. A bit further, about half, 48% of that 21% are family foundations. So individuals are still driving most of that, like I mentioned a couple of slides back, and they are really, still driving most of the philanthropy in this country, more than the numbers show at the surface. It might be a foundation as a vehicle or a bequest, but individuals remain the main contributor here. And some additional notes that we wanted to point out today was that our giving by foundations estimate includes giving by operating foundations, community foundations, and independent or private foundations. And that would be where you would find your family foundations. And for further comparison, giving by individuals grew by an annualized average rate of 4.9% over the last 40 years, and foundations grew by 9.2%. And on this next slide, we'll dive into corporations. So as you see, we're kind of going through each category. Corporations did perform more strongly in current dollars amidst some unusual economic conditions, holding fairly steady the past 5 years. It also had the strongest growth rate of all 4 sources in current dollars at 3.4%, or measured at 4.2% when adjusted for inflation. And factors linked to this performance likely include the GDP increase, a decrease in corporate pre-tax dollars, and corporate giving includes cash and in-kind contributions made through corporate giving programs, as well as grants and gifts made by corporate foundations. And also, corporations often support nonprofits through other means that are not necessarily counted by Giving USA's report. Marketing partnerships, sponsorships, corporate social responsibility activities, all of which are worthy of consideration as you think about corporate giving and engagement across your organizations. And you might think of something like this as when you have a corporate partnership at your organization, are they giving internships or other opportunities to the people that you serve in your communities? Economic factors that has impacted corporate giving in 2022 includes the GDP, which has increased 1.1% in inflation-adjusted dollars. Corporate pre-tax profits decreased 1.3% in inflation-adjusted dollars, but increased 6.6% in current dollars. Corporate giving as a percentage of pre-tax profits remained at just under 1% in 2022. For the past 5 years, levels have stayed between 0.8% and 1%. So corporate giving as a percentage of pre-tax profits reached a high of 2% in 1986. And Jamie's going to talk to you a bit about where the money went.
Yeah, so we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about where the money went in terms of these subsectors. So when adjusted for the high rates of inflation, which is what the percentages represent, giving declined for 7 of the 9 major recipient subsectors. And you can see the outliers were foundations and international affairs. So in current dollars, giving grew for 5 of the 9 major recipient subsectors, and 6 of 9 subsectors continued to exceed pre-pandemic levels. So that's an important fact, right? Something positive there. That 6 of 9 subsectors continued to exceed pre-pandemic levels, even when adjusted for inflation. So those with the greatest decline had significant increases in prior years, and one of those was education, for example. So in a few slides, not now, we'll cover the 2-year change. You'll be able to see some more positive growth, but now I want to go a little bit deeper into some of these sectors. So international affairs organizations, that's one of the outliers, right? It grew by 10.9% in 2022. And that was in part due to donors responding to world events. So that's an important thing to take note of. This is also the first time education was not number 2. You'll see it in the number 3 spot, right? It was replaced by human services. However, the dollar amounts for human services and education are fairly close, almost the same. And this data actually does get revised. So when the next one comes out in June, it's possible they'll go back and will revise some of these numbers. So it's possible it could actually switch. So we'll have to see what happens. Additional years of data will indicate whether or not this is a 1-year occurrence, if this data stays true, or if this is an ongoing trend with human services being 2 and education being 3. And I just want to clarify what is human services organization versus public society benefit. It's a hard distinction. So a human service organization is a direct service organization typically, right? It serves the individual's basic needs, food bank, shelters for the unhoused, right? Those types of organizations. Where a public society benefit is a bit of a catch-all category. So it includes regranting organizations like National DAFs and the United Ways, as well as civil rights, voting rights organizations, certain science or research organizations, and many others. And it could be that some of you on here are really interested in the tax code. So I will share that Giving USA uses that, the National Taxonomy of Exempt Entity Codes, to be able to determine categories. So for human services, they use IJK LMNOP, and for public society benefit, they use RST, U, V, and W. So if that's something that you're very familiar with, you'll understand that very clear distinction. So we can move on to the next slide. And now I want to do a little bit into environmental giving, right? Which is really just environment and animals, but to be able to give a little bit of detail. So contributions to environment and animal organizations declined by 1.6% from 2021 to 16.1 billion in 2022. So adjusted for inflation, giving to these organizations declined by 8.9%. So also in current dollars, environment and animal organizations experienced their highest giving to date, so that you can see that on the right-hand side chart. Giving to the environment and animal subsector amounted to 3% of total giving, right? If you go back to these slides in the future, you'll see that at the bottom it does say 3%. In 2022, contributions to environment animal organizations totaled the third highest recorded to date, adjusted for inflation. And an important, exciting note, right, is since 2018, giving to environmental organizations was one of 3 categories with the highest giving growth rate, right? This is something positive, something to really think through as you're planning for the future. So we can move on to the next slide, which now here's that 2-year data that I wanted to show. And this is that 2-year data really does show something positive. So you can see educate on the right-hand side, there's red circles, and you can see education, foundation, health, arts, international affairs, all experience positive growth, even when adjusting for inflation, right? So that is that 2-year positive growth. Giving to international affairs is influenced by international crises. I talked about that a little bit prior. Examples, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that did impact giving. Also, giving to international affairs and giving to foundations both reach the highest giving level on record when adjusted for inflation. So 2 areas of significant growth. International affairs is giving to organizations based in the U.S. who do work internationally. Just for that clarification, those organizations are based in the U.S. This is the Giving USA data. So you'll see that giving to foundations, right, had been above average number of mega gifts in recent years, which makes the series a bit less obvious, tied to year-over-year economic trends. And we're unsure, right? Is this an aberration or is it a new trend as we move forward? We're going to find out. So now we're going to move, right? We've been talking about the Giving USA data, and now we're going to move into the CCS survey data that I mentioned we would be sharing. So CCS did a bit of their own analysis in 21 and 22. This is called our CCS Philanthropic Pulse survey. That's the source of this data. It was conducted in October and November of 2022, and it provides a window into fundraising practices of nearly 1,200 organizations across the nation. For this purpose, because of how we're focused on New Jersey, we also pulled data from the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And that represents about 160 or so respondents. So of the 1,200 or so total organizations, 160 respondents in the New Jersey, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut column for tri-state area. And you can find more information about this survey and subsequent reports, more webinars, right? Everything on the CCS website when we're talking about this Pulse survey. So this question was, what practices has your organization adopted in the past 2 years that you plan to continue? So you can see a lot of different items on the bottom, but what we want to focus on today and really highlight is it's really important to engage with donors. It's really important to understand their needs, and it's really important to build relationships. Donors want to be involved. They want to understand how their donations are making a difference, right? All of you fundraisers know that it's about building trust, right? Building relationships with your current donors, and that it's a huge focus. So you can see that there in the chart. And we find that when organizations prioritize donor retention and invest in building strong relationships with their supporters, they do create a sustainable and resilient fundraising strategy that then can weather economic fluctuations, societal changes, right? All these tough situations and challenges that organizations face. So the personalization is also in the chart, right? The personalization of the donor experience, understanding donor preferences, communicating in a relevant and authentic manner. It's really crucial for engaging and building trust with donors. So technology is going to play a part in that, right? It does play a significant role in fundraising, and we do predict that it's going to continue to play a significant role in the future of fundraising. Many organizations report that, they are shifting priorities, and social media has become a top focus for them. Digital giving is something that will continue to be really important. Many organizations adopted digital giving years before the pandemic, but it is happening, right? Giving through mobile devices is at a higher rate. 75% of Gen Z and millennial donors give to their charities online. 75%, right? So that online options, those mobile giving options are really important. And in general, nonprofit organizations that are adapting to the new technologies, utilizing tools such as AI, chatbots, right, to grow and support their work, will likely see benefits in the future. So going on to another slide about top challenges with the Pulse survey. So you can see the two top bar graphs, right? So more than 6 out of 10 organizations reported having increased their new donors, but 36% of respondents reported retaining the majority of their new donors from the prior fiscal year. So as I talked about on the prior slide, again, it's essential to emphasize the significance of long-term donor relations and donor retention. We are recommending for most of our clients that they should begin adding a stronger focus on donor retention strategies across the board, right? How are organizations doing this? They're using data, they're using technology. They really want to have a better understanding of the average donor to that organization. They want to enhance donor engagement. They want to be able to make informed fundraising decisions based on that data. Going down a little bit in the chart, organizations that invested in hiring and retaining staff exhibited more growth. I think that's an obvious one. And looking at the last bar graph, right? Most respondents only receive about 20% of their contributions, or up to 20% of their contributions, in the form of non-cash assets. But organizations do cite staff knowledge and staff ability to explain the non-cash gifting process as a big challenge and an area, for potential growth for sure. So now I'm going to pass it to Rita to talk a little bit about DEI.
Thanks, Jamie. So in 2021, we included this information, I should say, because we thought it might be really interesting to the work that you're doing at your organizations. And in 2021, there was an increased focus on DEI, and we're really seeing that. We're in 2024 now. That has not changed. That, if anything, it has increased even more. So there was an increased focus on DEI and inclusion over, across philanthropic sectors, and the environmental sector was no exception here. Significant support was directed towards increasing environmental equity with a variety of complementary goals, including ending environmental racism and advancing climate justice, combating the effects of climate change in urban areas, building community resilience and sustainable economies, and mitigating climate-associated health risks in low-income communities. And key takeaways that we received from the Pulse survey, which Jamie mentioned, was two points we kind of wanted to mention today. Was while DEI conversations with donors have decreased, organizations that incorporate DEI into their fundraising strategy saw greater growth. So in their communications with donors, but also internally with their staff. And offering DEI training to staff and board members became the top tactic for organizations to meet DEI goals, with more than 50% of organizations citing it as their #1 strategy. So as we wrap up, you might be asking, what's next? You guys threw a lot of data at me right now, and what am I supposed to do with this? So, what is next? What should we do with this information? So before we wrap up, we wanted to share a few considerations as we approach this work through a real growth mindset. So number one being the market is increasingly competitive, coupling, and with that, you might consider coupling relationship-based donor-centric strategies with, data analytics, utilizing new giving tools, some that Jamie had mentioned in a couple of slides back, to really increase the value of your average gift and increase short-term fundraising revenue. If the number of donors and dollars are going down, competition is absolutely going up. It means we have to work that much harder as fundraisers to capture as much of that dollar to continue to champion your respective missions and visions. And we're seeing more sophisticated donors diversifying their giving. With a rise in family foundations, as we mentioned, DAFs, and the great wealth transfer being upon us. So in the near and long term, we really need to diversify our fundraising strategies and leverage planning, giving, planned giving to really meet donors where they are. And an important point to really take home is that donor retention remains a challenge across the sectors. Many subsectors saw incredible increases in 2021. 2022 was a difficult year in retaining donors. And, we're seeing with all of our clients across the board that we need to pay special attention to first-time donors, keeping an eye on lapsed donors, Libunts and Sibunts. And we have to find innovative ways to use campaigns in whatever form makes sense to tether donors to the organization's mission and vision, and make them, excited and engaged and wanting to come back for, more time, treasure, and talent. And there's a few other facts and stats that I would leave you with. As Jamie mentioned, mobile devices are now responsible for the majority of all visits to nonprofit websites. Over 3/4 of surveyed Gen Z and millennial donors reported giving to charities online. And this really speaks to the importance of digital engagement, making sure, kind of doing a download on or a review, a study of how your website is performing and how that looks on a mobile phone. Individuals view nonprofits in this country with more trust than they do any government or philanthropic entity. However, only 5% of people think they or someone they know have been helped by nonprofits. So it's an interesting gap to be aware of as we think about case messaging and communication with clients across the board. Our country continues to get more diverse than it has ever been. Race, different household types, country of origin, cultural, age, linguistics, religion, and fundraising is not a one-size-fits-all model. Next generation and diverse donors tend to think of participating in social movements and using their voices as important ways of giving back. The best performing development operations will continue to implement different and innovative modes of engagement as donors prioritize different causes. And tools such as ChatGPT offer new possibilities for nonprofits and fundraisers and donors kind of in the ideation phase, but also how they're communicating with each other. Knowing when to deploy these tools is important, but I think if there's like one point we can drive home today, it's that human connection remains at the foundation cornerstone of philanthropy. So that kind of wraps up our presentation for today. We really appreciate you making the time and taking the time out of your day to join us and listen. And we hope you found some of the data or all of the data informative. We will likely be able to share this slide. I'll leave that to Allie to communicate with Lauren after, but I know this was recorded as well, so feel free to share with colleagues. So just a little bit about what's coming soon. So we presented the 2022 data, but for Giving USA, the 2024 release and New Jersey event is coming in the early summer. That's on the right side of the screen. I kind of went a little out of order. CCS's 2024 Philanthropy Pulse report is coming next month, actually, which is crazy. It's almost February, so keep a lookout for that as well. I'm sure there will be some, location-specific presentations that you'll be able to attend as well. And then the New Jersey Philanthropic Landscape specifically is coming in the late spring, so please keep a lookout for that. And I think my colleague Allie will hopefully put our emails in the chat, or maybe Jamie can, but if you have any additional questions after you leave today's presentation, or you'd like to set up, quick 15-minute chats about your organization with me and Jamie, please feel free to reach out to us. We are always a resource at CCS, and we would be happy to work with you. Thanks.
Any questions for the CCS group? I have a question, Lauren. This is Donna from the Lake Apacon Foundation. How are you? Um, so Rita, could you just talk a little bit more about when you mentioned on the last slide of your presentation about 5% of people think that they haven't been helped by a nonprofit? Was that part of the study that you presented, or where did you get
It was
that data from?
Sure. It was part of the pulse survey that that CCS had conducted. So how I interpret that data, and I definitely want to look into that more for you, Donna, would be it was actually on the next slide, Allie, the what's next for philanthropy slide. That is meaning if donors don't feel like they're getting something out of the organization, and specifically millennials and Gen Z donors, they might be less likely to renew their gift or give again or attend the event, or kind of all of those things. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any additional questions? Any surprises?
It's all very, 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 very interesting. Thank you.
For
My
years,
pleasure.
watching this report, I always like to see that environment and animals was always kind of trending up, and that this, like, especially younger generations care about doing good and care about the environment. And that always gave me a lot of hope. Like, we're never going to compete with religion and education, but I was a little disheartened to see that, oh no, it's dipping a little bit. I mean, I know you play with it with the years, but I don't know.
And
I'm
it's
just,
not, it's not only environment and animals,
right.
but we definitely hear you on that too. Like, I think
Yeah. I thought we were approaching like some momentum, and it was really exciting, and I hope that that stays. But at the same time, just last week, I was in a conversation about philanthropy as a whole, and one of this presenters who had nothing to do with the environmental space brought up how hard it can be to get grants in the environmental space compared to health, human services, where we don't have those like tug at your heartstrings stories. Maybe to us we do, but to the greater world, we're not as, like, I know Sarah McLachlan and the animals, it can be really sad, but we're not children with cancer. And I hate to even say that, but it's just, I do development communications, and I'm always like, why can't we get through to people more? It's sort of like the foundation of our all of our health and long-being is health of our environment, right? So
But please stay positive, right? It is the highest giving to date for
Yes.
environment and animals, right? That is a fact, right?
Yes.
Inflation has impacted across the board, and it does have one of the highest giving growth rates. So I do think you can confidently say, that both for environment and animal organizations, that it is improving, it's growing. It is definitely an area where there is interest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this graph looks much better. Yeah, we're getting there, right?
The highest giving to date. Yeah.
Okay.
That's 16.1.
And I like the mega gifts part. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Is any of this information reflecting with people's what they're seeing within their organizations? Are you seeing something completely different?
Yes, the Family Foundation definitely saw an increase in the advisor-led donations that you mentioned, the community.
The DAFs, yep.
Yep. And in our case, we're losing big chunks of money in grants coming up. So this is very timely information.
Yeah, with respect to the foundation giving, I thought it was kind of interesting to see that between 1982, the difference in the pie chart in 1982 versus 2022, it seems that all of the gains in foundation giving was taken from individuals because bequests and corporations were about the same.
Yes. And some of that also, Heidi, rolls into like family foundations being more popular than I think ever before.
Do you think that's pretty much the entire 16% growth?
No, I don't think so. I'm not entirely sure of like the specifics of that, but I don't think so. But I do think that has grown over the years, specifically since the 80s.
Okay, thank you.
especially some of those larger donors, right? A larger donor in 82 might now have their money in a family foundation or in a DAF, right? That's changing the pie chart composition. It's still individuals, right? It's still really important to build relationships. It's still really important, right, to be able to explain where the money is going to real people.
Mm-hmm.
Any closing remarks, Jamie, Allie, or Rita?
I don't think so. We're, again, if there's any additional questions that you have, don't hesitate to be in touch. And we just hope that some or all of this data will be relevant to the work that you're doing. But also keep a lookout for the reports and the, the survey information coming out in just a couple of months.
Perfect. We'll have this group back, the CCS fundraising team, together to give an update. Excited about this new information that comes out, and we'll be on the lookout. Thank you again, Jamie, Rita, and Allie. Everybody else would like to hang out, and we'll
Thank you.
have our traditional